Dibyakusum sir, I think we'll carry on with the lecture without the Facebook Live. We'd rather not eat into your time as well as the participants' time.
No problem at all. Whatever is the most suitable for the organizers is not an issue with me at all.
I'm extremely sorry for the inconvenience caused.
It's not your fault. I absolutely do understand that. We can start right now, or we can start later. Whatever you ask me to do, I will. No problem.
No, please start now. Yes.
Okay, no issues.
Yeah.
So shall we go over it again, all these introductions and everything, or shall I just?
Yes. From the beginning, yes.
Okay.
Wait.
It's live. It's live now. We are live.
Are we certain that it's live, or it's just showing the signal that it's live?
No, it's live. Now I got the Facebook notification.
Great. Okay.
Hadi, I
think
you start with the introduction of Dibyakusum again, and then Dibyakusum.
Yeah. So a warm good evening to one and all. Thank you all for waiting for the past 15 minutes for getting this rectified. Thank you all for staying with us. Welcome to the first installment of the talk series on film studies and visual culture organized by the Cine Club of Sri University. The forum aims to make distinguished film studies scholars, directors, and practitioners of cinema accessible to the students directly, thereby making them better equipped to learn, appreciate, and practice the art of cinema and its visual language. Our inaugural speaker is Dr. Dibyakusum Ray. Hearty welcome, Dr. Dibyakusum Ray, to the Sri University Cine Club talk series. Dr. Ray teaches English, Philosophy, and Culture Studies at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Ropar. He was previously working as an assistant professor at NIT Silchar. He has worked on what may loosely be called the archaeology of concept of other and liminality, proliferated through an inverted history of continental philosophy of a century and its absorption in Bengali radical literature. Right now, Dr. Ray is heading a centrally funded project on the archiving of lost media elements during the Indian national emergency from 1975 to 77 in collaboration with Royal Holloway College, London University. His book on the history of Indian urban literature is slated to be published in late 2021. He will be talking to us on the topic Politics and Cine-Politics, a look at the history of Indian popular cinema. Over to you, Dr. Ray.
Thank you very much, Hari, and thank you very much, Rindan, Dibbo, and the whole Cine Club for inviting me. It's wonderful, and I'm very, very happy to be here. I have also been given to understand that I would be addressing more of a mixed crowd, but given the circumstances right now, I think I'm mostly speaking to the students, which is a good news. Because I mean, to be very frank, I was in kind of a dilemma. The dilemma being, majorly being that although I teach films in class, but that's classroom teaching, and here it's an introductory lecture. So while not insulting anybody's intelligence or exposure to film medium as such, it is always a challenge to shift gear such as that. So the reason why I'm talking about this is, ladies and gentlemen, whoever is listening to me right now, you will have to assume that I am giving more of an one-sided lecture. So basically, I have an argument, a slideshow, which I would be playing out in front of you, along with the clips and everything, steadfastly. And of course, we'll be having a question answer session probably right after this. But before that, I have arranged it in such a way that it would go uninterrupted. So this linear mode of learning is something that I will have to follow. Really sorry about that. So that's one. And the second is, since you know me by face for right now, I would be stopping my camera for the time being, and I would be shifting straight to my screen. So I would just ask the help of the organizers, just tell me if you can see it, and then we can start there right away. So first, camera off, and then, yeah, just give me a second here. Sharing sound, optimizing for video clip, and sharing. Okay. All right. Can you see me like the screen as such?
Yes.
Yes,
Oh,
sir.
this is
It's visible. Yeah.
that's great. That's great. Okay, fine. Yeah, so this is where we are. As for the sound, I really cannot guarantee because it is asking me to I don't know, reinstall something in my computer, which I don't want to do right now. And anyway, it's too late. So I mean, if it really happens that if you like, we are made to watch silent clips and all that, I would try to make it up to you by explaining what is going on screen. But before that, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we are. I'm sorry that I've drifted a little, although in its very soul, it is correct. I mean, the same thing basically. But right now, as far as the language is concerned, as you can see, I have drifted a little apart from the topic that has been made known through the poster and all that. Although, again, although it's rephrased, it means the same. But before that, let me just address the elephant in the room right away. Why this and why not anything else? I am given to understand, ladies and gentlemen, that this is the first inaugural lecture, so to speak, for this Cine Club. So there are separate types, although not very steadfast, but there are types of movies, as you must know. There are popular, there are parallel. That's the most wide and pretty, I don't know, old and arcane sort of categorization that we make, don't we? I thought it is best to look at popular films as far as the opening lecture is concerned, because the students right in here almost, let's say, you are not much exposed to film culture or film scholasticity as such, the majority of my listeners in here. What I wanted to tell you, what I wanted to share with you, and which I thought, I hoped would be aligned to the interest of learning about films in a cohesive and congealed manner, is the relation between films, popular films, Indian films, and by Indian, I certainly don't mean Hindi only, but there is no denial that the Hindi film industry, which from post-liberalization India, that is from the 90s, have been called as Bollywood. The term Bollywood didn't exist before that. But then again, as I was saying, that Hindi film industry, certainly the most dominant and the most recognizable as well. For better or for worse, it is a good point to start. And it's a convenient point for me to start as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, plot, polity, and entertainment, the Hindi populace tryst with nationhood. I would explain everything, and it would take about 40 to 45 minutes is what I am gathering. Hopefully that much of time would be given. I can make it shorter as well, but let's see. So, plot, polity, and entertainment, the Hindi populace tryst with nationhood. Before I go into the topic itself, whatever the topic is meant, let us start from the very beginning. Ladies and gentlemen, the history of Hindi films as such, if you call it Hindi films, great. If you choose to call it something else, that's not a problem either. Anyway, Bombay film industry or ancillary film industries like Bengali film industry, Telugu film industry, Tamil, Malayalam, and several others, Marathi and all that, all industries in our country has been working in a more or less political mode from the very beginning. Please listen to every word that I'm saying, because it will be very key to understand what is going to be coming next right after this. My argument, or rather the general argument, is politics and the way film industries function are actually never much separate. If I may take a leap, especially in the sense of Hindi film, I would actually say that, I mean, not that it's never separate, it is always dependent on the national politics as per as the film culture or the film industry culture that goes on in our country. I hope till this point it is clear. The way the nation's politics, nation's political leaning, the majoritarian politics, electoral politics, call it whatever you want to, the way it is made, the way it has changed, the way it has gone through a specific type of evolution in the, let's say, in the last 4 to 5 decades, the film industry, it has certainly responded to that. There is no question of it. Every film, ladies and gentlemen, every popular film, like when it comes to the parallel film, we are not even going to talk about that because that's even more so. But let us talk about popular films. Popular films, every single piece of popular film is political in that sense. And you might be mentally, or maybe while your camera is off, rolling your eyes and thinking that, oh, this is something that we have heard so many times. Personal is political, isn't it? Yes, of course, you can politicize anything. Anything with a narrative can be politicized. Any piece of literature, any piece of poetry, anything that doesn't happen in a void, which is basically everything, can be politicized. Well, you are right. What is new about it? What is new about it is that when it comes to films, you really don't have to look much further. You really don't have to look, like beyond a certain narrative. That's why the word plot is occurring over here. Remember, you can't just have a look at the plot, and you can just have to look at the plot and the other plots that are going to be happening right around it. So basically a cluster of films at a given historical time, historical temporal time, you simply can basically guarantee that this is political. Not only that, there is a response system between politics, national politics, and the national films or Hindi films in a certain sense of the term. Okay, so there is a conversation, a political conversation. Something happens in politics, it is responded. Something happens in films, it is responded politically. Sometimes it so happens that films sometimes are prescient of political changes. They can sense how exactly politics is going to be changing in a decade or so, and exactly that way, not so much stylistically, but narrative wise, it changes its own modicum as well. And if we go by a very basic meta-historical way, like looking at films from one decade to other decade to the other decade, another decade, we would be seeing it's nothing but the truth. But, ladies and gentlemen, please also remember that given this space, given the time frame that I have been given, and of course, the general scheduling and all that, we will not be able to talk about all the decades. So, for this particular lecture, this particular juncture, I have chosen 3 decades to be specific: 60s, 70s, and 80s. Why not 90s? Because from 90s comes Bollywood. Bollywood is a separate industry. Bollywood is a separate thing. Bollywood happened after film as a national industry ceased to exist. If we have to talk about it, we will have to talk a lot regarding that. So I'm not going to be going into that. But till then, these 3-4 decades, maybe a little bit of 50s as well, if we look at the popular films, you'd be having enough idea how and why, how intensively as well, popular films and politics are intricately related. If we look at early films like this, Dadasaheb Phalke's Raja Harishchandra, or even Devdas, Pramathis Barua, and if we are not talking about popular Hindi films for 1 second, if we look at Sant Tukaram, Vishnuman Govindamle, all of them extremely iconic films for their time, they had a certain manner of speaking, a certain manner of plotting whatever they want to say. The plots mostly are devotional or narrative in the sense literary. Of course, both of these, Raja Harishchandra is mythological. This one is literary. This one is mythological, and at the same time, it follows a certain theatrical modicum, which was not at all uncommon in films before the independence as such. Let's have a look at how exactly films used to talk at that time. Somebody, please let me know whether this is audible or not. Just give it a second. Just give it a second. Is it audible?
Yes.
Okay, great. That's awesome. Let's have a look.
डोळा ऐसा हा आकांत परतीडे चित्त दुःखी होते काय तुला येते नसालसे झाले आम्ही न देखिले पाहिजे परचक्र कोठे हरिदासाच्या वासे न देखिले तदेशे राहतिया तुका म्हणे माझी लाजविली सेवा खिलपणे देवाजीने झाले तुका म्हणे माझी लाजविली सेवा महाराज जेवणाच्या लोकांचा वेढा पडला ह्यावेळी विचार करू नका पांडुरंगा प्रल्हादा कारणे नरसिंह झालासी त्याच्या बोलासी सत्य केले रामकृष्ण गोविंद नारायण.
Theatrical, melodramatic, most certainly, but I mean, which might be a bit lost on the students in here, probably because because of their fault. It certainly is my fault because I'm not having enough time. The thing is, there is a constant argument, a constant attempt to discover a national identity. This is very important. Please remember, this is a country. We are talking about a country which is not a democracy yet. We are talking about a country which is basically, let's say, on the cusp of independence, but they don't know what to do with it yet, right? So a national identity, what does it mean to be together? What does it mean to exist as a democracy, not somebody's slave, but as an independent agency as such? These were actually the time when such films were being made, and as you can see, Khwaja Ahmed Abbas, when he was making it, Dharti Ke Lal, for example, in 1946, this particular sense of inclusivism, as you can clearly understand, I mean, why inclusivism? Of course, an identity, make an identity for everybody concerned, socially relevant. You understand the word, right? Socially mobilizing, absolutely, make it inclusivist. When Khwaja Ahmed Abbas is making the very iconic film, Dharti Ke Lal, which was an IPTF film at the time, it was just as important, and it was becoming even more clear. As you can see in Mother India, which was like, let's say 10 years after the independence, again the same sense. So basically what we can argue is that throughout the late 40s to the late 50s even, we have seen the tendency of providing for the films, providing a national identity. Different types, yes, but a national identity. What does it mean to exist as a nation, right? One single example, one single clip, and the clips would be few and far between as we progress. Let's have a look.
यही माटी में जियन हमरो यही में मरण है भैया यही सगरी पूंजी यही है हमरो धन है भैया.
As you can see, inclusivist. I mean, can you really imagine right now a film being made in this way, in this almost documentary cinema verite fashion, non-glamorous people adorning the screen, right? And the songs, of course. I mean, it's certainly very folkish, isn't it? And not only that, the lyrics, if you understood it, that we are coming from this earth, right? We are coming from this earth, we are living off this earth, this is our country and all that. Not only that, on the forefront, there would be a mela, a fair of a village, right? And as you can see, like, it's a celebratory, carnivalesque mood because the country is slowly coming into its, let's say, independent existence as such. If we proceed even further in Satyajit Ray's Pathe Panchali, Ritvik Ghatak, Subarna Rekha, and all that, this search, this attempt for a national identity, which is not necessarily a happy identity or like a conclusive argument all the time, not necessarily that, but it still continues, right? There are two, actually there are not two, just one single clip that I'll have to show to you to prove my point further. Not only that, this would also catapult us to the next section as well, to the 60s. This is from Raj Kapoor's very iconic film and a very iconic song. I'm pretty sure at least 80% of the audience right now must have heard it. Pyar hua ikrar hua hai, pyar se fir kyun darta hai dil, right? Shri 420 is the name of the film, made in probably 58, if I'm not much mistaken. Let's have a look at it. Probably the first 1 or 2 minutes, then we'll get right back to the track.
इकरार हुआ है प्यार से फिर क्यों डरता है दिल प्यार हुआ इकरार हुआ है प्यार से फिर क्यों डरता है दिल कहता है दिल रास्ता मुश्किल मालूम नहीं है कहाँ मंजिल कहता है दिल रास्ता मुश्किल मालूम नहीं है कहाँ मंजिल प्यार हुआ इकरार हुआ है प्यार से फिर क्यों डरता है.
So I can go on with this, but to be very frank, that's not necessary. As you can clearly understand, I mean, although it's a romantic song, the setting is very urban. And if you have seen the film, it is actually, the film is regarding housing projects in independent India and the corruption and the hope and the failure of the hope and the redemption regarding that project and everything. So not only that, this young lover couple, they don't know what to do I mean, I can't play it without the sound. As you can see, they are passing through the city. The city is yet being made, and if you are an eagle-eyed observer, you must have seen in the background a train passed, right? So the city is coming up all around them, and there is a shot right after this, very noirish, but I'm not even talking about that. Let's go ahead a little bit. If I, yeah, there. Oh, fine. This is exactly what I'm talking about. As you can see, new buildings, new street, new electric lamps, new housing projects, and within that, two lovers unsure about where to go. This is political, no doubt about it. Because remember, ladies and gentlemen, what is happening politically in the country? The nation was being made under Jawaharlal Nehru, right? The first prime minister. The nation was being made, city planning were being done, even if there were actually several reasons for being, I don't know, disgruntled with the way democracy was functioning. All of such aberrant materials, so-called aberrant materials, were being put under the wraps for the time being, because naturally it's a new country. It's just a birthing of a new nation. There would be teething problems as such, but we will proceed with it. Independence and the rise of every man. If we look at the films, at this time, look at the films, popular Hindi films of this time, we would be able to see 2 or 3 major aspects. The first is focus is on the common man, right? Rebuilding a nation free of elitism, 5-year plans with special focus on agriculture, Indian Independence Act 1947, the abolition of privy purses. This is what I want to draw your attention to, the last 2 points. The rise of the hyper-masculine, charming, dark-skinned Desi hero who wins over the remainders of colonialism, especially the Angrez-looking heroine, and the non-masculine everyman fighting for a realistic socio-political cause. As you can understand, you might struggle a little in here because I'm being too brief, but maybe this picture would help. As you can see, the heart of the country and the heart of the film industry, the depiction of Bombay film industry, the image of Bombay film industry was being Indianized, right? Racially, culturally, everywhere, it was being Indianized. Dilip Kumar, for example, Dilip Kumar, the dark-skinned hero trying to woo Nadira, who is, I mean, if you've seen the film you would know that she's very European, wears an European dress, but when this dashing, princely kind of guy comes in front of him, not very handsome maybe, but she falls right in love with him. Same happens in Avara in Raj Kapoor as well in 1951, where, as you can see, I mean, like the seductive figure in the front is actually dressed in an evening European dress. On the other hand, Raj Kapoor's character in Avara is almost a defeatist, right? He's like very extremely effeminate, not in that sense of the term, but he doesn't have that masculine quality that Dilip Kumar used to portray in Aan as well. Yet he gets the girl. Okay, so and if we proceed a little bit further, and if you're moving into the 60s, we would see the same thing continuing in here as well. In Hakikat, Chetan Anand's Hakikat, Dharmendra's earlier films and all that, it's based on the Sino-Indian War. And although India kind of loses that war, the extreme valor displayed by the Indian soldiers on the battlefield was never missed by the film industry. Another example is 1960s Hum Hindustani, which was directed by Ram Mukherjee. And here again, as you see, Sunil Dutt's character is a builder of the nation. So my point is actually this is Jawaharlal Nehru. But before I go into this, please understand what the point is, ladies and gentlemen, is basically the country was moving towards an inclusionary politics. Inclusionary from all level, racial, of course, I mean, yes, females are there. If you're taking it from that perspective, yes, it's very male dominated. The narrative is certainly very masculine. There is no doubt about that, but it's inclusionary in the sense it's a benevolent patriarchy. If you look at it right now in here, you would be finding some inroad into there as well. The very transition from the colonial to the post-colonial state in India thus raised in turn an important question about Indian political life. What would constitute the limits of the political and independent democratic India? How would politics in the country reflect in everyday life the idea of the popular sovereignty that underlay the parliamentary form of the government that was enacted in the 5-yearly ritual of universal adult franchisee? Nehru even looked forward to a certain kind of diminution of the role of politics in national life. In today's world, an engineer has more value than an officer sitting in secretariat. Similarly, scientists are more valuable than our ministers. I am fed up of politics. This is important. This is interesting. I cannot give it much importance, but it's very key to understand it for the rest of the argument. So just give me a second here. Inclusion, political inclusion, including everything, including all the people, all the jagged, jarred edges of the society, poor people, caste, class, economic boundary wise, include everybody, try to make a meta-narrative which kind of fulfills all the need, right? It's like an kind of a automatic mutual back scratching, right? It's like, I mean, yes, everything is fine. Might be an illusion, but an important illusion, especially if it is coming through films. So the whole argument of social mobilization through films were happening at these lines. And if you match that with the slide previously, which is this one, guys, you must have certainly, it couldn't have missed you that Jawaharlal Nehru at this point in the 60s, Jawaharlal Nehru is voraciously arguing against politics. Why? Why? Because isn't Jawaharlal Nehru's position at that time a political position as the Prime Minister of the country? Certainly, certainly. Then why this attempt to depoliticize it? This, ladies and gentlemen, has been the paradox of our country, probably all democracy all around the world as well. Whenever there is politics, it's like some sort of, in a mysterious way, politics comes out of conflict, right? Politics comes out of conflict and the conflict's resolution. This conflict and conflict's resolution, paradoxically, always try to go towards apolitics, as if removing politics away from your life, from your aesthetic, how should I put it? From your aesthetic expressions would be the resolve of all problems. You would see what I mean. If you include everybody, naturally, doesn't matter however fictional it is, if you include everybody, then there is no conflict. And if there is no conflict, then there is no need for a resolution. And if there is no need for a resolution, then why is politics mattering after all? That's what Jawaharlal Nehru seems to be saying at that time. The paradox is it doesn't stay like that. Apolitics in a democratic system, especially in a country like India, does not stay like that, because we will see in the 70s, and we are at the 70s now, you would see things have changed a lot from politics to apolitics to intense politicization is what we are moving towards. Have a look at this. From 1952 to 1967 in Lok Sabha and State Assembly, Congress's Congress's dominance was reducing rapidly, as you can see in here. So this whole idea of apolitics was, even if it was there, it was largely fictional, or at least was thought so by the people of the country. These are such films throughout the 60s of the horror, thriller, suspense, Teesri Manzil, Gumnaam, and all that, which wanted to stay away from politics and mostly focused on the feudal or independently rich, wealthy business classes of the country. And but that those inclusivist politics in the beginning, where poor people would be coming into the center stage and all that, even that time was over. It seemed to be that it was totally gone, but it was not. 1973 comes Zanjeer. 1973, not exactly 1973, only 2 years later, there would happen one single event in our democratic firmament, which changed everything, which is basically emergency. Indira Gandhi's emergency. All again, you would understand it as the ceasing of all political involvement. At the same time, films were responding against it. As I told you, it's an intensive conversation system, right? Across India, people were being picked up and put into jails. This included leaders and legislators of parties other than the Congress, student activists, trade unionists, indeed anyone with the slightest connection to Janasangh, the Congress, or the socialists, or other groups opposed to the ruling party. Some of the detainees, such as Jayaprakash Narayan and Morarji Desai, were placed in government rest houses in the state of Haryana, not far from Delhi. However, the majority were sent to already overcrowded jails, and Mrs. Gandhi's arithmetic was soon shown to be wildly off the mark. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you must understand, the 70s popular cinema was again, like always, reacting against or for the politics of that time. In this case, it was reacting against because Indira Gandhi's government, or rather Indira Gandhi's decision regarding the emergency, was pushing the democratic fiber of the country to such a brink that even the Hindi film industry was up in arms with the socialists and other so-called aberrant elements of the country to resist it at all costs. The popular films of the early mid-70s are more or less leftist in their thematic sensibilities. They speak of the betterment of the peasant labor class by the hand of a solo vigilante hero. However, the vigilante has to be validated either by familial structure or by the judiciary. In most cases, the vigilante is from the emergent Indian middle class. As always, I would attract your attention to the last 2 points, and let us talk about, let's say, 5 minutes regarding this, along with one clip, and then we will go to the last phase of it, which is the 80s. Let's consider the first point. Do I have some time in here? Let's say 10 minutes or so, 10 to 12 minutes.
You have the time, sir.
Okay, great, awesome. However, the vigilante has to be validated either by familial structure or by the judiciary. This is a bit packed, a bit paradoxical, and I would like to explain it. Of course, I mean, I will have to assume that you know what angry young man films are, right? Angry young man films, to make it very brief, angry young man films are mostly Amitabh Bachchan starrer, early films, mostly penned by the screenwriter duos Salim Khan and Javed Akhtar, and several mega hit films came at that particular time, right? Most of them were actually starring Amitabh Bachchan as in the central role, who generally come from the peasant or labor class, and later on becomes a vigilante in his life, right? Peasant, and it is generally shown through the plotting that the peasant and labor class is affected by the decisions of the capitalist and the feudal landlords of the country, and the system all around is failing them big time, due to which the youth turn to crime. But even when they are living a criminal's life, they never let go of the sadness that comes with the criminal life. They themselves feel that they are lost of their humanity, right? Which is why I am saying the vigilante has to be validated, right? You cannot simply be a vigilante. You can't simply be Batman without the necessary moral and ethical dilemma that comes with it, right? And exactly the same way, at the end of Diwar, probably the most famous film by Amitabh Bachchan in his angry young man phase, the same thing happens. You have to be pardoned. You will be pardoned in this way or the other way, by the family, by the good people, by the suffering silent people, and you would atone for your crime, right? Why? Because of the middle class value. The middle class by that time, by the 70s, were an emergent economic cultural class of the country, and they wanted this to happen, right? A dilemma. Which way to go? Do I go for the crime, or do I stay as I am, as I were, right? Do I protest? Does protesting mean that I am going against the fiber of the democracy of the country and I'm choosing the life of a criminal? If that happens, is there a pardon for me? I know that the country is ineffective. I know the democracy is failing me, yet, if I am looking for forgiveness, if I am looking for redemption, that redemption must come out of the democracy only. Understood? Just one single scene from Diwar, and we would be like more of the 75% of this lecture is done, which is here, right here. Very famous, sorry.
रवि, तुम्हें यहाँ पे तुम जिस रास्ते पे चल रहे हो उसका अंजाम क्या हो सकता है? जिस रास्ते पर मैं चल रहा हूँ उसका अंजाम शायद बुरा भी हो सकता है, लेकिन जिस रास्ते पर तुम चल रहे हो उसका अंजाम सिर्फ बुरा ही होता है भाई। रवि, मैं तो अपनी बाजी खेल चुका हूँ, अब हारूं या जीतूं, लेकिन तुम्हारे पास तो भी वक्त है। इस शहर के बाहर दूसरे शहरों में तो पुलिस स्टेशन होते हैं, कहीं और चले जाओ। मेरे असूल, मेरे आदर्श मुझे इसकी इजाजत नहीं देते हैं। तुम्हारे उसूल, तुम्हारे आदर्श, तुम्हारे उसूल, सारे उसूलों को गूंथ कर एक वक्त की रोटी नहीं बनाई जा सकती रवि। जिन आदर्शों के लिए तुम अपनी जिंदगी पर खेलने के लिए तैयार हो, क्या किया उन आदर्शों ने? एक 400-500 रुपए की पुलिस की नौकरी, एक किराए का क्वार्टर, एक ड्यूटी की जीप, 2 जोड़ी खाकी वर्दी। देखो देखो, ये वही मैं हूं और ये वही तुम हो। हम दोनों एक साथ इस फुटपाथ से उठे थे, लेकिन आज तुम कहां रह गए और मैं कहां गया? आज मेरे पास बिल्डिंगें हैं, प्रॉपर्टी है, बैंक बैलेंस है, बंगला है, गाड़ी है। क्या है तुम्हारे पास? मेरे पास मां है।
Okay. Yeah, of course, you know about this, right? Everybody, every film watcher in this country would be knowing about this particular scene. And I really don't have to tell you much why this is so germane in the present context. You see the conflict between the, let's say, the aberrant, the lost middle class and the not so lost middle class, which is Ravi. Ravi is a police inspector. And although the world is an unfair place, life hasn't been very fair to both of them, Ravi still remains, let's say, unwavered to his adarsh, as it is being said in here. On the other hand, the adarsh, the ideology, the morale is lost on Vijay, right? But Vijay is never free of the dilemma. And at the time of a heated conflict, and conflict in the sense of verbal conflict, Ravi plays the trump card. Ravi says, "What do you have?" So Vijay asks, "What do you have?" "I have a house, I have a car, I have money, you have your morale." And morale doesn't mean much. Morale, you cannot eat morale, you cannot drink it, you cannot fulfill your basic daily needs. What do you have? And Ravi, unwavered, replies, "I have my mother." Again, a very loaded line, which I don't want to talk about much, but as you can clearly understand, mother is nothing but the nation. Or rather, mother is kind of a meta-historical narrative. Mother might mean a lot of things. Mother might mean morality. Mother might mean the nation. Mother might mean the democracy. Mother might mean the general value system of the middle class society, or mother might mean all of it all together. And as a result, Vijay is dumbfounded. He cannot reply. So far, the story so far, ladies and gentlemen, what have we started from? We have started from the inclusivist politics, right? Inclusive right after independence. We have seen films coming up on a high hopeful note. They are like dancing together around the fire, trying to make sense of a perfect world. However, that perfect world seemed not so perfect as time passed. And as we would see, and this is strictly popular film, parallel films go in a different direction. We're not going to be talking about that in this particular lecture. So, but that does not seem to be going very well, because slowly that inclusivist politics started to become apolitics as such, because we kind of, as a democracy, started to believe that yes, all is well, everything is okay, right? Even Jawaharlal Nehru himself said that politics is not needed. And as it happens, as a reaction, films were to be made which were devoid of all politics, political consciousness, political conflict in general, right? That's why we have the slew of films which generally are produced by and generally starring characters which are from the high bourgeois, elite, feudal, businessmen, all these classes and all that. However, in the 70s, this thing changes big time. And we see that politics has come back resoundingly into the center stage, and the labor class or the poor class or the urban subaltern are back to the game with a vengeance, right? What happens after this? What happens after this? What happens after this is the darkest time and the least, this is the last phase. So just hold your patience for 7 to 8 more minutes, and then we are done, I promise you. This is the 80s, is the darkest time. When it comes to the politics, even darker than the emergency time. Why? Because even politically speaking, it was an extremely barren period in Indira Gandhi's second term, and then after Indira Gandhi's killing, Indira Gandhi's assassination, as you know, followed the Sikh genocide, Operation Blue Star that preceded it, and then came Rajiv Gandhi, and Rajiv Gandhi till the 90s. Right after that, we are going into a different direction. However, if we are to like put one single focus on the political scenario of the 80s, it would be separatism. All the separatist arguments, statewide separatist arguments in our country, reached their zenith at the time of the 80s. We simply could not stay with each other. We simply couldn't stay with each other. And it was a general loss of faith, even with greater intensity than the time of the emergency. And there is a very huge difference in here as well. It's a general loss of faith in judiciary, in politics, most importantly, and that was not in the case of the emergency, in ourselves. Why not? Because we cannot stay with each other. If we are to find a villain of this entire cause, all we should be pointing at is basically towards each other. You are the villain, you are the villain, you are killing me, I'm killing you. I am Sikh, you are Hindu, you are Muslim, and we really cannot stay with each other. We are from Assam, we are from Telangana, we are from Punjab, we are from wherever, and we cannot stay with each other. The whole project of an united country was failing big time, right? All it needed, popular cinema, was to give them a fictitious character, a villain who would be so outlandish, so non-Indian, so alienish that we would at least fictionally be able to pool all our grievances into that character and call ourselves happy. 80s is that time, ladies and gentlemen. 80s for the first time in Indian democracy and the cinema history of Indian democracy. It's the time of the villains of outlandish, spectacular characteristics, which won certainly 1980, and you simply cannot dismiss it as a mere coincidence because it doesn't happen like that. Shan 1980, Shaka, look at him. Look at the villain character. Look, I mean, I wish I could show you the villain characters before that. They were smugglers. In the 70s, the villain characters were smugglers. They were corrupt people, businessmen, feudal lords. Many villains we have had, yes, before it, but no, nothing like this. Shakal, for example, Shakal is not even an Indian name. He is of mixed ancestry, as you can clearly see. His skin is white, but not maybe as white as a foreigner. He speaks in a mixed language, in a hybrid language of English and Hindi. And the way he has been depicted, oh my goodness, that's something to see. And I would be showing that to you, and maybe we can conclude it right after. Yeah. There we go.
Sit down, gentlemen. Sit down. Shakal साहब, हमें एक न्यूज़ देनी थी आपको. मैं जानता हूं. बैठो. तुम लोग समझते हो कि तुम मुझे
I really don't have to go any further. Just remember one thing, ladies and gentlemen. For the first time in Indian cinema, we have a villain character like this. Outlandish, mixed ancestry, very obviously inspired by James Bond films, but that is not the point. The point being, what does it depict? It depicts an alien figure, a reason, a rationality for all the unrest happening in the country from outside. So basically, the focus is taken from the country to a fictitious character outside so that people within the country, politically speaking, people within the country can end up blaming that outside force, outside influence, and just, be happy. Perfect escapism is what I would prefer to call it. You can call it something else as well. So before concluding, it actually goes on like this. For example, you can look at 1983, the character called Pasha, right? Just look at his attire. The attire is of a tribal lord. He has a Muslim name and he's a smuggler by profession. See, they are trying to overlap between several alienating principles to see what really sticks, right? A hybridized character. That doesn't mean anything. Okay, we can proceed even further. In Mirth, for example, the villains are coming from the British India. The whole film is set in British India. Karma is a very good example in 1986, especially with the villain character, Dr. Dang. Yes, you heard it correct. Dang, D-A-N-G, Dang, who again is shown to be the terrorist villain, the villain from outside who speaks perfect Hindi and English. Nobody knows where he's coming from. He even looks a bit of a foreign guy, isn't he? But from where, you really cannot say. Visually speaking, it's a very interesting thing. Politically speaking, it is, I think, even more interesting. So before concluding, ladies and gentlemen, let me just remind you once again what we have been talking about. We started from inclusivist politics. Then we went into apolitics. Then came a time of intense political resistance at the time of the 70s. And last but not the least, during the 80s, there was separation, separatist politics all around. And what we needed are the villains, right? This has been, in a very broad brush stroke, has been the general idea that I'm trying to put forward in here. I'm really sorry for any incomprehensibility as such, because I would like to go into this in a finer detail, maybe some other day. Till then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. This is my lecture so far. Yes.
Thank you, Dibyakusum sir, for that wonderful and rather, I should say, an entertaining lecture for all of us. I mean, the manner in which you were able to trace the trajectory of Indian cinema all the way from the 70s to the 80s, and to tell us how Indian cinema and its contribution to the fashioning of a national identity during the early years of the nation's creation. And it was also interesting to see how you were able to sort of trace it down through the nation building process, and which in fact, according to you, finds an expression in the visual aesthetics of early Indian cinema. And rather moving on to and seeping into the changed political scenario of the 70s and the 80s, where cinema is in fact mirroring the political turmoil on screen as well. So I mean, thank you for giving us that wonderful lecture and giving all our students who are part of the film club, as well as the others who joined us today evening, an insight into early Indian cinema and the rather larger politics of it. I open the session for any questions anybody might have in the audience. Rundan, should I be reading out some of the questions that have come up on the chat box? Or do I ask the participants to ask them?
No, I think it would be better if you read out with their names.
Right.
I can see it actually. I can see it as well. You don't have to stress yourself. Akash is asking how the Bollywood industry is influenced by Hollywood. Akash, it's a very wide question. I mean, I'm pretty sure you don't want me to go by from point to point, because that's simply is impossible. There are several ways it is influenced. The main influence regarding me, I mean, as far as I understand films to be, the way Hollywood industry, we have to look at it economically and sociologically. So the way Hollywood as an industry performs, and the way Bollywood, if you are a fan of that term, then I would use it. Yes, Bollywood, the way it performs are very separate. So there cannot be any ingrained organic relation between them. The relation, or rather the influence, as you put it, is actually visual. The Hollywood, I can give you examples of the 80s. For example, there has been, for example, the earliest sports films in Hindi. There were films like Boxer, there were films like Champion, Rustam, and all that in the 1980s, which can be called as earliest Bollywood sports films. Now, as it happens, all of these films, the films that I have just mentioned, all of these films were influenced this way or the other, sometimes shot to shot taken from existing Hollywood films as such. However, there was an interesting change. There were several elements from the Hollywood films that were completely cut down. What was most interestingly, what was incorporated in the Indian version of the films were family drama. So family drama is actually, so in that particular sense, in that aesthetic sense, in that sense of the plotting as such, these films are actually as much Indian as they're Hollywood. They're just taking the template, not the inside, or rather the soul of the film. Plotting is completely different. It doesn't matter however many similarities between characters you find, you would see the characters always react to the plotting. They're placed into the plot, into the narrative in a completely different manner than the other types. So this is what it is. It's mostly visual. It's mostly template wise. When it comes to thematic copying, I don't think that happens much. Even if it does, it ends up in a disaster, a commercial disaster as such. Hopefully that answers it. Okay, and then I think what, I somehow cannot go up. Manoranjan's question, okay.
So the next question followed after Akash's is by Ria.
Yeah. Why was symbolism the political atmosphere of the most important aspect of films during these time periods instead of a direct depiction? Okay, Ria, the reason is, it's a good question, and the answer can be really long. I wouldn't go into that. I'll just answer in one single sentence. The reason is aesthetic mobilization in the sense that how exactly you can mobilize people, mobilize society, mobilize a certain section of the crowd aesthetically, not in the sense showing them a film, showing them a painting, showing them whatever aesthetic component that you choose to. In our country, this aesthetic mobilization, the tradition of aesthetic mobilization, is always symbolic, especially when popular films are concerned. Why? Because Hindi film industry, technically speaking, has a very close relation, and I'm talking about a physically close relation to politics as such. From the very beginning of the film industry, right after independence, through several, let's say, several government organizations like CBFC first, NFDC later, and all that, the government has tried to dabble into the capitalist venture that was going on in our country in the name of film, right? So, as you can clearly understand, when you are so close, physically speaking, when you're so close to, not even thematically, so close to the power, the seat of power, you really cannot afford to show everything on screen as it is. It has to be symbolic all the time. Not only that, you'll have to account for the, and I'm sorry, I'm going beyond two sentences here. You'll have to put the account on the audience's choice as well. The audience, I mean, to be very frank, technically speaking, we as people of this country are generally fond of symbolic storytelling. Even our folk cultures are all based on storytelling. Raconteurism is what you can call it, actually. So storytelling talking about a story, telling a story, listening to a story, you know, like in the ancient days in the field, there is a person, you surround them and you listen to the story and all that. This has been the cultural modicum of our country and the general populace as such. Whatever westernization has happened, its reach is rather limited. So that might be another reason. I'm just guessing in here. Okay, and then Manoranjan is asking, when did we see the adoption of literary text in Indian cinemas? It has been throughout. It has been throughout. Once Satyajit Ray ruefully said that, I'm sorry, I'll have to go a bit of a Bengali here. Bengalis generally, they have a certain way of saying the films are generally not spoken of films or cinema in Bengali. They call it boi. Rendon would know, and Dibyakusum would know. They call it boi. Boi means book. Boi means book. So now, Satyajit Ray once ruefully asked that, I don't know for the life of me why they call, Bengalis call boi and not a film. The reason probably Satyajit Ray, which he might have missed, and somebody later wrote that because literature has always been, or rather literary adaptation has always been a very important point of filmizing in our country, of filmization in our country. It has been there from the very beginning. It is still continuing the intensive connection between literature and films. I hope that answers it somehow. Okay, fine. Then, how do we see dance numbers and politics of female representation in these films? Also, how was the noir genre introduced and incorporated? What I would really like to know is how are these villains, or the introduction of the villains character, different from the DC and Marvel villain characters? I really don't know how to answer this. This is a very wide question. To be very frank, I don't have the answers to all of it. For example, I'm not sure whether any of the films that you see right now can be called noir or even noir influenced remotely. Noir is a rather untouched genre other than a bit of visual similarity in some of the earlier films. However, I would rather like to focus on the second part of your question, which is villains are DC and Marvel villain characters. Okay, Simran, Simreen, you are pushing me to a very bad place. You are pushing me to that extent where I would be taking another lecture for 55 minutes because this is my favorite topic. Let's not go into that. Let me just tell you, DC and Marvel and comics characters, comics villainization as such, comics antagonization in the American context, if you're specifically talking about American context, is always intensively political. It has been intensively political, and if you are watching right now the Falcon and Winter Soldier, you would know actually in most of the cases, basically, even in Marvel, even in DC, the villain characters are very political even now. At the height of the Cold War, even statistically speaking, even at the height of the Cold War, that used to be the golden age of American comics and the golden age of comic villain as such. So in that sense, yes, there is a connection. Not only that, as you can see, this politicization, whether you want it or not, that's a different question altogether, but this politicization of the characters, the villainous characters in the comics is very much related. So that's why I say comical villain, right? So this in the comics and in Indian popular in the 80s is very similar. And not only that, if you look at the arc of evolution in both of them, which has to happen in a separate lecture, you would see there are clear parallels between the two. I would proceed to the next question, is, do I see it? Okay, Nimisha, and I think this would be the last one that I'll be taking, if that is okay, because I think my throat is rather parched. So you walked us through how movies have more or less represented the country state, the political nature of it through the 3 decades. So what do you think the current state of our country is according to the films being made in the current era we are living in? You want to land me in jail, Nimisha? I really, I mean, I cannot speak my mind here. But let's say, Nimisha, right now, as in right now, we are in a very delicate situation, because we have something right now which was not even thought of before, which is the OTT. OTT has the online platform has completely changed the way we look at films, and the whole division between the popular and parallel films, which people basically thought to be written in stone. Not only that, everybody thought that the parallel film industry is gone for good. Even in the early 2000s as well, it has resoundingly come back in a very hybridized, interesting fashion. And you are able to see a lot of films that by the government itself are called sometimes as seditious. Right. So it's a very interesting time, because the celluloid in general, celluloid was generally taken by mainstream political films, mythological and all that. If you have seen Tanhaji, you know what I'm talking about, big budgets and everything and all that. However, given the pandemic, the scenario has changed drastically. Now we all have to depend on the OTT, and it's a as you can see, there's a lot of court cases and everything that is happening in here. That's a very political move. Please understand it. It's a very political move. It is a political, as you can clearly understand. So the division between the celluloid and the TV, the big screen, the celluloid screen and the computer screen doesn't exist anymore. And it is bound to have some effect on politics, probably in a bigger way in the coming days than we see in right now. I am not feeling good about leaving all these questions, but let me just have a look at them if I can answer, all of them together. Why an Indian film has never won an Oscar? Sahil, I'm not gonna even read the rest of it. I'm just gonna tell you that because it doesn't matter. The simple thing is that it doesn't matter. Oscars have a completely different, and to be very frank, Oscar is a really bad award, if you ask me. If you have to look for a much more prestigious award as such, you can look at Cannes, CNNES, but not Oscar. That is my personal belief. The second is, has Indian cinema always been a musical theatrics from its genesis, or was it an evolution with time? And why musicals? Because of its, as I just said, it's very folksy origin. Indian films have a very folksy origin, and from the deepest recesses of our folk industry and our folk culture, folk culturalism, films came into existence. That is one of the primary reasons. Some Manoranjan says, thank you. And Rohit is saying, by citing apolitical too as political through the example of Nehru's quote, aren't we easily bringing all movies under the umbrella term politics? Will that be corrected too? Okay, Rohit, it's an interesting question, probably the most germane of the thing. I have heard this so many times before. What he wants to say, Rohit, is basically that if you're talking about apolitics, then the choice of being apolitics, that I don't want to be into that political section straight on as such, that choice is kind of taken out of my hand. If I keep saying that apolitical is also political, then I really don't have any choice of being apolitical. In other words, I might be a charlatan, simply, finding out, discovering politics where there is none. Could be. It's a nice argument. Could be. Am I looking for political specters everywhere? Is this whole argument, this whole tirade regarding films and its direct relation to politics is just a fiction? Does it really exist or not? Rohit, that's actually your job. You will have to find it out, and you are absolutely free to go against what I have said. But please remember, anything you say has to have a meta-historical methodology. What I have tried to do is to match films with the politics of that time. In that sense, when I am talking about the 60s or the late 60s so-called apolitical film, if you look at the part of this question is coming because I couldn't explain the politics at the time. If you look at the late 60s or early 70s politics, you would say that is also politically a very sterile time. Not much was happening. The country was still coming to terms with what the hell's going on with democracy as such. So yeah, that is the reason, according to me. But if you have a different idea about it, I'd be more than happy to hear it. That's it.
Thank you, sir, for answering all those questions. And thank you, members of the audience, for asking all those wonderful questions and making the session a lively one. It's already time, and I think we can conclude as of now. That brings us to the end of the inaugural session of Sri Sri University Cine Club Talk Series. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude and thanks to Dr. Dibyakusum Ray for taking time off your busy schedule and being with us, for accepting our invitation and talking to us at this forum. I'm certain that your lecture will hopefully be a lucky charm for us for henceforth, for the activities of this club. I would like to also thank Mr. Randan Kundu, Chief Mentor of Cine Club, Mr. Devditi Saha, Mentor of Cine Club, and our dear students, members of the Cine Club, Nimisha, Aniket, Ayush, and Sai Sanjana, for organizing this event and directing the activities of the Cine Club. I would also like to thank the IT department of Sri Sri University for helping us conduct this virtual meeting, though we did manage to have a little bit of issues in the beginning, but thank you for being with us and letting us have this opportunity of conducting it online. Special thanks is also due to Devditi Saha for designing the poster and the promotional materials of the event. Thank you, Devditi. Finally, I thank each and every one of the members of the audience, friends and colleagues, I can say several names in the audience, for having joined us virtually and for making this event possible. Thank you all. Farewell and have a good evening.
Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dibyakusum.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Just wait. 3 of you, please.
I'll be here.